everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Female Film Critics panel. And this week, I'm very excited. We have with us film critic Laura Clifford with us. And thank you so much, Laura, for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me, Rachel.
Yeah, so what we like to do for new guests is give you a chance to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you got started in film criticism and tell us a little bit about your show.
Okay, well, like many of us, partly it was inspired by watching Siskel and Ebert back in the day, but even before that, I don't know why exactly, but I was always drawn to foreign films and such at an early age. I was an only child. I don't know if having to entertain myself had something to do with it because I was on my own a lot. But I was drawn to film very early, and I was also living in Boston. At the time, anyway, it's not so much anymore. It was because of all the colleges, there was always a lot of film activity around the area, and we had a lot of good film writers. I grew up reading the late, great Jay Carr in the Boston Globe, and he was a wonderful writer. We also had the late, great Boston Phoenix, or the Real paper back in the day, and they had a lot of interesting writers. So there was that. And then when I met my husband, he was also, of course, well, we were drawn to, that was one of the things that drew us together. We were both very into film, and we started dabbling around with making film. We started taking some film classes. We were both in the high-tech industry, but we started taking some classes at Emerson College in Boston. We started taking some classes at the Boston Film and Video Foundation, which doesn't exist anymore. I bought him a 16 millimeter camera for Christmas one year. And so we were always, doing all these things. And of course, I have bookshelves behind me that are filled with all kinds of film books. And then one day I was yelling at Siskel and Ebert.
Yeah.
And I mean, not that that was normally the case. I adored especially Roger Ebert, but there was something that I disagreed with them vehemently about. And so we decided to take a crack at doing a film review show, and we started it back in 1991.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and we've done it every other week since then, without a break.
Amazing.
We're about to shoot episode 820 next week. I always like to say we started our show the same year that The Simpsons started on TV, and we've outpaced them in episodes.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. I know I was, because I'd seen your review of Joyride, and I was like, oh, wow, this person has interesting opinions. And then I looked, I'm like, oh my gosh, she's been doing this so long. It's amazing.
It's funny you bring up Joyride, because I'm definitely in the minority on that one. And I saw that you really liked it. And I turn liked No Hard Feelings, which I'm also in the minority on. But then again, comedy is I find a tough thing that what appeals to some just doesn't appeal to others. So, but yeah, so, boy, when we started out, it was so hard to be in front of the camera, because I tend to be kind of a shy person. So that was an interesting hump to get over, but now it's just it's just kind of old hat now.
Well, to not only to have the show for so long, but to do it with your husband, that has to be really an interesting experience.
Yeah. We had one guy who directed our show for about 20 of the 30 plus years that we've been on. And he said he had an observation that I thought was interesting. He said, you guys frequently agree, but often for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Like we'll both like or dislike the same films, but come at it from a different angle.
Yeah.
But then every now and then there's something that we're really on opposite ends of the spectrum on. I tend to go for more, some of the real more hardcore art films that are harder to get into.
Uh-huh.
I'm also a big horror junkie,
Oh, okay.
and my husband does not like the horror genre. So,
Okay. Yeah.
things like that is kind of interesting.
When you go to a screening, do you talk to each other after, or do you wait until the show?
Eh, a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
We do. It's kind of difficult not to, but we don't get too into it, or it'll kind of take away the freshman of the argument. On the other hand, our show's pretty fast paced.
Yeah, you cover a lot of movies
it,
on.
it's only a half an hour, and
Yeah,
we've been doing 8 movies a show. We actually
that's a
used to do
lot.
more than that, but it was getting a little ridiculous. So, but even at 8, I mean,
It's a lot.
we're really, after you show a clip and what have you, we're really only giving each other 2 to 3 minutes a movie to talk about it. So that's, the website came a little later, and we can get more into things, of course, when we write a review than we can talking about it on the show. The show's more of a quick hit thing.
Yeah, yeah, you do both. Yeah, written in and the video and the show. So that's
Yeah, and
interesting.
I saw you've been writing for quite a while and got
Yeah,
into it in an interesting way as well. I liked your concept of reviewing all the Disney movies to
yeah,
start off with. That was an interesting way to come at it.
yeah, yeah. I tore my MCL in my knee, and I was immobile for like a whole summer, 2014. I'd always wanted to review the whole Disney canon, and I was terrible like at SEO and setting things up, because I had different names for everything because I set them up for different reasons. And it wasn't until fairly recently that I was like, okay, I got to make everything Rachel's reviews. But I originally set up my website was 54 Disney reviews, because that was all I was going to do, was just review the Disney canon. And now I've actually reviewed the Disney canon 3 times in
Oh
my
my.
content. Yeah. And I just really enjoyed particularly writing about film, and people seem to like what I had to say. So I just started doing more than that, and kind of evolved.
Are you a fan of Rachel's reviews? Do you look forward to Family Movie Night, Female Film Critics panels, or the Talking Disney podcast? If so, please consider supporting the podcast by becoming a Patreon. As a patron, you get to access monthly events such as the watch-alongs and Q&As, where you get to talk to stars and find out the behind the scenes of the movie making industry. And you can pick what I review for Family Movie Night, or even become a guest on the podcast. Podcasts and YouTube channels are expensive, and I really, really could use your help. I would so appreciate it. You also get to be a member of the Facebook group, where we talk about all the films that we're seeing, and we have so much fun. Go to patreon.com/hallmarkies and select one of the Rachel's fan tiers. That's patreon.com/hallmarkies.
Yeah, it was an interesting, unique way to I felt like turning a negative into a positive.
Yeah, the very first show we did, we reviewed the 5 Best Picture nominees, because it was right before the Oscars were gonna happen. But that was the last time we did that. That from
Oh,
the
really?
second show on, it's been new theatrical releases, and of
Mm-hmm.
course now it's not just theatrical releases with all the streaming and what have you, although we still largely stick to theatrical releases.
Do you have like your sort of most memorable disagreements? Because you do agree a lot.
Most memorable disagreements: Liquid Sky, a sci-fi movie from quite a while ago that I absolutely embraced and my husband hated. We just recently reviewed. I don't know if you're familiar with the documentaries from Harvard's sensory ethnography lab.
Hmm.
They did an interesting documentary a number of years ago on a fishing vessel called Leviathan, and they have a very unique way of going about their subject, and I really embraced that one, and my husband hated it. They have a new one out called De Humani Corporis Fabrica, which uses medical films to really explore the human body and the fragility of the human body. He liked that one, although he didn't care for their earlier ones. Those are the two of the biggest ones that come to mind. Other than that, it's more of a case of my favorite films that I want to watch aren't necessarily his favorite films that he wants to watch, even though, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at your top for 2022, and I saw over 300 movies last year, and a lot of these I've never even heard of. I'm like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I take great pleasure in, is trying to find some of these smaller, independent films that people may not have heard of, and try and get an audience for them. That's one of the biggest pleasures, I think. Whenever I hear from somebody that goes, wow, I never heard of this, and I loved it. It's like that's such a great feeling. And it's wonderful to try and boost some of these artists. There was a recent little movie, it's available on streaming now, called Out and About. It's about a guy in Hastings-on-Hudson who takes a walk around his neighborhood and meets all these people. And it just encompasses so much in these little conversations he has with people he meets on a walk. And it's such a different kind of movie. I loved it. Last year, there was one made locally on Cape Cod by a family stuck in their house because of the pandemic, called Red River Road. And that's also available on streaming. And I was just amazed at the ingenuity in what this guy was able to accomplish with stuff that he had in his house. Granted, he had the family is theatrically involved in the theater in the Cape, and he does have filming equipment, but he did some really cool things with practical effects and what have you, and it was an ingenious little story too. So I love trying to get the word out on some of these kind of films.
That is definitely the best, when you can introduce people to something special that they might not have otherwise seen. I felt like last year I did that with Marcel the Shell, for a lot of my friends that probably wouldn't have seen that, and I really, really enjoyed it. And they just did actually a movie in the park here. They did Marcel the Shell for Utah Film Center, and that was really fun. And I was really impressed, like the size of the crowd that came out for that movie. So you like to see it, because I just thought it had such heart and was such a sweet, lovely little movie. And that's the best when you can do that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, as a matter of fact, one of the things you had asked was, I was trying to think about, what have I reviewed, or my content that I'm most proud of, was something you had mentioned. And it was kind of like, that's a really hard question to answer. And you yourself brought it up. It's like, go to my top 10 lists on my website, because that's where I think a lot of the mix comes through. There's certain films that are great, but everybody's heard of them. Everybody knows about them. They've been discussed to death. Then there are wonderful little films like Kent Jones, a film critic, made a film called Diane with Mary Kay Place a number of years ago. What an extraordinary little movie this was. So few people have heard of it.
Yeah, I never heard of it.
Things like that. The Killing of Two Lovers, another particular special favorite of mine. just didn't get enough publicity, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, like you have on your list, you have a movie called Nitram. I've never heard of that.
Which one?
It says Nitram.
Oh, Nitram. Yeah, that actually won Best Actor at Cannes for Caleb Landry Jones. It's an Australian film about the one mass shooting that happened in Australia before they really cracked down on their gun laws. And it's told in a very unique way. It's not exploitative. It kind of is more an investigation into this guy's character and how society can kind of breed that in the way we treat people who might be a little different. So yeah, that was a very shattering film, I found. And I also an actor that I rather like ever since I first saw him in Antiviral, which was Brandon Cronenberg's first movie. I believe it was his first movie. Son of David Cronenberg.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that was somehow I missed that one. So that's
Yeah,
really cool.
you should be able to see that. I think it was running on AMC Plus, if I'm not mistaken, but it's out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did you have a film that really kind of started your love of film that you remember maybe?
Ooh, that's really hard. I mean, as a kid, we had a local cinema that I used to go to, and I remember seeing a lot of these Euro pudding fairy tale type movies there when I was small. And then I remember seeing the Beatles movies when they first came out down there. But as far as a particular single film, I really couldn't name one. It just kind of grew organically.
Yeah, for me, it was The Little Mermaid. That was the first. I don't know if it wasn't the first film that I had seen, but that was the first one that really made a big impact on me that I really loved.
The original Disney one,
yeah,
I presume, yes.
yeah, in
The original
1989.
animation.
Yeah, I loved the music and the story, and I was a kid that really wanted to be taken seriously as a kid. I didn't like things that were silly, and I mean, and there's obviously very silly parts of The Little Mermaid, the chef and everything, but just that whole thing with Ariel and her desire to be, to be taken kind of seriously, and her rebelliousness, I think I really connected with.
Yeah, I mean, I seem to think of more pivotal movies when I got a little older. For example, I remember dragging a cousin of mine to see Nashville.
Okay.
That kind of thing, which maybe wasn't the typical type of movie that people my age were going to see at the time. John Huston's Wise Blood, I dragged a friend of mine to see that when that came out, and she fell asleep. So I was seeking out, I spent a lot of time, and silent films too. Again, growing up in the Boston area, in Cambridge, we had some amazing movie theaters that are gone now, like the Orson Welles Cinema. There was a little cinema called The Hole in the Wall where I went to see the original silent Wizard of Oz. We were just so blessed. Things like The King of Hearts, they just became these cult movies. It was really a cult movie area.
Yeah.
So it was a great place to grow up as a movie lover.
I bet. Yeah, that sounds good. Well, how do you feel about the current state of cinema? Are you optimistic or pessimistic about it? Because, I mean, I think the optimistic side, at least for me, is that almost anybody can have an avenue to get their movies made now with so many different, there's a streaming service for everybody. And so you have an audience that you might not have had before. And with digital, you can make things way cheaper. You can make movies on your iPhone these days, but still, it's just, it's so hard in other ways, and with the pandemic and everything and closing down cinemas. Overall, how do you feel about where we're at?
Somewhat divided. Of course, what we have going on now with all the writers' strike, the SAG strike, and everything, it looks like everything might just shut down any day now. But yeah, streaming I find to be a mixed blessing. In some ways, it's opening avenues to people that wouldn't have otherwise had them. People who live in rural areas can now see some of the most unusual films that maybe would never have come to a theater anywhere near them. On the other hand, I find the amount of content overwhelming.
Yeah.
And just as a parallel, I mentioned earlier, I'm a real horror junkie. And one thing I always say, horror movies, you have to watch 100 to find one good one.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many out there that are just terrible. So you have to go through a lot of chaff to find the really good nugget. And I think streaming is kind of also having that kind of what you're about anybody being able to make a movie. There's just too much content out there.
Yeah.
And to wade through it all to find the good stuff. The one good thing is the way the streamers are set up. You have niche streamers like the Criterion Channel and Mubi that you can, and Shudder for horror people, that you can go to for certain types of things. But some of the more wide open things, like Netflix and Prime, it's like, it's just this big mishmash.
Yeah, I was thinking about that with animated films, because I love animation. In the 80s, there were years there wasn't a single mainstream animated film released, none. And so I think when something that's flawed would come out, you would kind of appreciate it more because it was that's all you had. Something like Oliver and Company or whatever. That's not like the greatest movie, but it was it was the only release. And now we have 30 mainstream animated films released, and there's just so much that a movie can come and not have as much cultural impact, even if it's a really solid film, and unless it's something really unique, like the Spider-Verse films or something like that. And I don't know, I agree. There is so much content, and I was really on the streamer side for a long time. I even did this show Hidden Gems on my pod for a long time, and because I felt like, it's a way to have these films be so much more accessible than they used to be. But once they started just deleting movies, and you have no other access to them, and I know that always happened, but usually it took a lot longer. And you literally have a movie that just came out, Crater, on Disney Plus in May, and it's gone. Nobody can ever watch it again. It's just like,
I know.
What?
And the other thing is, look at Disney, I think, kind of damaged their brand by releasing things to their streaming channel and not giving them a theatrical release. Case in point, Turning Red. I thought Turning Red was the most original Pixar film that had come down the pike in a long time. Thought it was one of their very best. And I think they made a big mistake not putting that out theatrically. And then when they do put one out theatrically, it pales in comparison. It's like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, I mean,
it's very disappointing. And it's also what you're talking about the way they're pulling pulling things off left and right now. I'm panicking about the loss of physical media. I'm a big fan of Blu-rays, 4K HD discs, and I've started to panic, and I'm starting to buy a lot of movies on physical media now to make sure I'll always have the ones that I really, really want to have.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's tough because some of the major manufacturers don't even make the Blu-ray players anymore. So, at a certain point, like is that even going to be like an option? I mean, most people I know don't even have a Blu-ray player. So it's like
some people, and people have I know of people who got rid of them because of the streaming age. But yeah. I wonder if that was, now the movie that you think is always going to be there might not be.
Yeah, and a lot of these movies, like I loved Timmy Failure, Mistakes Were Made, and that it's just gone. Nobody can watch it anymore. It's been removed, and it just makes me so sad because that was just sweet, lovely little film. And you're right too. I mean, I wasn't a big fan of Turning Red actually, but I think it deserved to be seen. I think that it's a real shame that they have at least done some kind of a Fathom event or something, where people could get a chance to see it, just like a weekend or something. Those films like Mitchell's versus Machines, I was lucky that I was able to see that at Animation as Film, and I saw Luca as well, which Animation as Film is an absolutely wonderful film festival. It's really well done. But yeah, that year I saw they had Vivo there. They had all these movies that had just gone straight to streaming, and it's a bummer that people won't get to see those films. And I do think that especially with Pixar, that people did become conditioned to wait to see those films until they're on streaming.
He's Johnny.
And he's Darren.
Do you like movies?
Do you like your childhood?
Do you like movies from your childhood?
Do you like podcasts about movies from your childhood?
If you answered yes to one or all those questions, then you might enjoy NostalgiaCast. It's a podcast about movies from your childhood.
So if you're nostalgic for nostalgia, then you might like NostalgiaCast. See, that's the name of our podcast, NostalgiaCast.
Yeah, I think they got that.
Should we sign off?
Let's do it. I'm Johnny.
And he's Darren.
And this is
NostalgiaCast.
I win.
Yeah. Conversely, I also see local theaters running films that have already come out on streaming, which is so the reverse of what I'm used to, having grown up before the VHS came out. I used to actually have a reel-to-reel tape recorder that I would tape things off of the TV on and just have sound. So, it was always, something would be in the theater and then you'd have to wait almost a year before you could watch it at home when you could finally do that. Now things are coming out that you can watch at home and then go to the theater. And yet it surprises me, people still go and see these films in the theater. So that is encouraging.
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty encouraging, I thought, with Across the Spider-Verse, like how well that film is done, because it is such an artistically ambitious film. Like
yet explain Super Mario Brothers to me.
Yeah, there. I don't.
Not that I disliked it, but
I didn't hate it, but I thought it was very
okay, but why the immense success that it's had. And the other thing I'd say about the state of film is I did a halftime roundup at the end of June, and I had 13 films that I had given an A or an A- to at the halfway mark.
Pretty good.
I mean, out of 200, 100, no, not 200, about 125, I guess.
Yeah. So what's share some of your favorites of 2023?
My favorite so far is a French film called Pacifiction.
Oh,
It's 3 hours long, and it's about a French diplomat in Polynesia who suspects that nuclear testing may be about to begin again, and he's trying to work all his contacts to find out what's going on. It's an interesting character study. Benoit Magimel is the star of the film, and he's like this typical diplomat, glad-hander, seems rather shallow, and yet he has all these interesting relationships, and he does seem to care about the people and the island he's stationed at. So it's a really unique character study. The cinematography is gorgeous. The way they use colors of the Polynesian sunsets and the ocean is just magnificent. There's also an interesting transgender character in it who's rather intriguing.
What's it called again?
It's called Pacifiction. It's by a filmmaker called Albert Serra, who I think he's a take it or leave it kind of filmmaker. The people who love his films love him, and the people who don't. He made a film a number of years ago called The Death of Louis XVI that I also flipped for. But I think he might be a bit of an acquired taste. But anybody who I could encourage to give that one a chance to, it's just a very moody film that you kind of slip into. My husband gets annoyed by lengthy films. He's like,
oh no, he must be miserable lately.
He was enraptured by it. He was completely sucked into it. He didn't mind the length at all. So yeah.
Cool. I hadn't heard of this one.
Yeah, so that's one of my favorites. Also, a couple of the films that were submitted for the international Oscar last year but didn't get released until this year, I really liked. The Blue Caftan was stunning. Joyland from Pakistan I really liked. And then more mainstream ones like Matt and Ben's Air, I thought did you see that about Mickey?
Yeah.
I thought that was surprisingly good in a more mainstream kind of way.
Mm-hmm. I haven't heard of that one.
Really?
My favorite so far this year is Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret,
which I missed.
Oh, you haven't seen it? I really enjoyed it.
No, I have not seen it.
I thought it was just, I gave it a 10 out of 10, and I never do that. But I came home and I was just like, I don't have anything. Like, it was so well done that I really enjoyed it. So
yeah, we were both being extremely COVID cautious. So we were not going to public screenings earlier this year. We were only going to screenings that were just for press people.
Yeah, so they didn't do one there.
Yeah, no, they were all. So that's why I missed it. Now I've started easing my way back into some of the more public screenings again. So yeah, that was why I missed it. And that's one that I really want to catch up on.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And then I also, I really did enjoy Spider-Verse. I think it's a little bit weaker than the first one, but I think it's also hard to say because we haven't seen the whole movie yet. But I was just so impressed with the animation.
Yeah, I would agree with you, although I thought the animation, I thought narratively it was a little weaker, but artistically it was a little stronger.
Yeah, I agree.
In the animation. Yeah, that was really extraordinary.
Yeah. What do you think about how bad this Flash movie did? Would that surprise you at all? I
thought it was okay.
Yeah, I did too.
I gave it a B minus
Yeah.
overall. So positive with
I
some.
gave it a 6 out of 10. So kind of.
Yeah, that's right in the same ballpark. Yeah. The Ezra Miller thing is a little disturbing.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Right.
And so there's that. And I didn't think, while I've liked some of his performances in the past, I found him, I don't know, I thought he played it a little too, I found the performance too juvenile, truthfully. But I liked other aspects of the film quite a bit. I also thought Warner's was a bit arrogant about the way they handled it, coming out and declaring it the best superhero movie of all time before it came out might not have been the best move.
I think they piqued interest too early, and what worked for me about it is this scene where he has to say goodbye to his mom. And that, to me, that was emotionally true, and I could feel it. And so I think that was what tipped it over from being, for me to giving it a fresh review, was I felt like that emotion was there. But it is kind of crazy when they had so much time. How could they not make it look better?
Yeah, the CGI was very hit. Some of it was actually the scene with the babies falling, where he's trying to save the babies from the maternity ward. They had a therapy dog that to me looked like it could have been a real dog. Everything else looked terrible. In the same scene.
Yeah, agreed.
So I don't know. And it was enjoyable having, they took a page from the Spider-Man movie by having, the other actors who had played superheroes in the past. And people do enjoy that, and it was kind of fun. And I actually thought Michael Keaton saying "I'm Batman" was one of my favorite parts of the movie.
I like that a lot better, because I'm not the biggest fan of Batman 89. I just didn't grow up with it. I don't love it, but I thought his role was a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be. I thought he was just going to be like a little cameo, but he had like a real role, and I enjoyed what he did as well. I think it was just one of those sort of just mixtures of all the different factors that all come into play. I did not think it would bomb as bad as it did. But I think it's that partly because Spider-Verse was also a multiverse film, was also in theaters, and that was so special. So you immediately had that to compare this Flash movie to, and so that was it just made it like a cacophony of bad timing.
There is all something to be said for superhero and multiverse fatigue. Especially in the MCU. But that was surprising. I'm also surprised that the new Indiana Jones movie didn't do better than it did.
I was pretty meh on it, but I thought it would do better. I thought it would be more crowd pleasing.
I actually personally would rather watch the new one than any of the other sequels.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Interesting. I quite liked it.
What do you like it better than? What do you think it does better than the other sequels?
I don't know. I was never a big Indiana Jones fan to begin with. But there was something about the way I liked Ford's performance a lot. I liked the way they acknowledged his age. I thought the opening sequence was terrific, and I thought the de-aging was very well done.
Yeah, I actually enjoyed that too. I thought it worked. The opening sequence was my favorite part.
Yeah, it was. I also really loved the ending, but Yeah, and the way they worked Phoebe Waller-Bridge in as an adversary ally,
Mm-hmm.
I thought kept things interesting throughout. I just really enjoyed it. I liked Harris. I liked Ford's kind of rebellious nature, even now as this old guy, realizing he couldn't do as much as he could in the past.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies.
Yeah. I mean, I always hope for films to do well. One thing that's interesting that's been happening in film lately is the Academy has been rewarding small films recently. You know, everything from Parasite to Coda to Nomadland to Everything Everywhere All at Once. How do you feel about that? What do you think, as opposed to, you know, your Avatars, your Top Gun Mavericks, you know, these sort of bigger films? What do you think about that?
Well, it's obviously not pulling in audiences for them. They're losing ratings.
Yeah.
But they're also choosing films that I'm more apt to be seeing. So it's a mix. I mean, do we want the Academy Awards to stick around? They might have to start awarding more popular films to get their momentum back.
What do you think of Everything Everywhere?
I admired it more than I embraced it. I found it a bit exhausting.
Yeah. I felt like, overall I recommended it, but I felt like it was a little try hard at times. Like it's like, okay, we get it. You're trying to be quirky. You don't have to turn into rocks. And like, it was just a little try hard to me at times.
Yeah. I liked it more than their previous film, which I did not like at all, except that I thought Daniel Radcliffe gave an amazing performance playing Corpse.
Right.
But I didn't care for Swiss Army Man at all. So this one I liked more, but
I agree.
It was just too, I mean, I gave it a B, which in your parlance, I guess, would be a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, that's basically what I gave it to, I think. But yeah, so you've been doing reviews for so long. Do you now sort of look back at old reviews and be like, oh, like your opinion on a film has really changed, or you're
you know what we were just talking about, where I'm starting to panic and buy movies and physical media that I want to make sure I have. I just watched Mulholland Drive for the first time in about 20 years the other day. And I went back to my review of it, and it was like, about what I'd say about it today. So I'm often surprised when I go back to my old reviews that expecting to cringe, and I don't do it as often as I expect to. The one movie that I feel the worst about for panning, that I just don't understand why I did, was the South Park movie.
Oh, really?
For some reason, I absolutely panned it when it came out, and I love South Park, and I still love South Park. I didn't like the movie. Who knows? So many things can impact your mood when you're seeing a film.
Yeah.
That's one that that it's like, oh my God, I was just completely wrong about. That's the main one I can think of.
Yeah.
And there are probably things where, I maybe overpraised that a little bit, or I maybe underpraised it a little bit, but not where I'd be completely reversed on my opinion.
Yeah, I for the most part am pretty consistent, and I know a lot of people will sort of take down old videos and things like that, and but I like for people to see the whole journey of it all and how I've learned. Because when I first started, it was just like me in front of my laptop, and I didn't have, the editing and some people would probably still say it was pretty rudimentary, but I like people to see sort of the whole journey of the content. So I don't take it down. But yeah, there are a few things. There was one really funny when I first got added to Rotten Tomatoes. Some poor soul had the job of uploading all of my reviews, because it was 2019 and I had been writing reviews for 5 years and doing some YouTube and stuff. So somebody that must have been a horrible job, but I had forgotten, because I love Christmas movies, and I cover Hallmarkies podcast, cover Christmas movies, and I had covered the Rankin Bass movies on my blog. I'd done a Rankin Bass month, and when those movies, when you watch them in and of themselves, they're like charming, but when you watch them in a batch, they really becomes grating after a while, and they become really repetitive, like the same kind of quirkiness over and over and over. And anyway, it was just funny because I had been I was like on the Frosty the Snowman, I was like, this is not good. And so but this was like well before I was on Rotten Tomatoes, and it was just funny because one of my followers, because they know me as like the Christmas person, the Christmas movie person, and they were like, you gave a rotten to Frosty the Snowman. And I was like,
Killjoy.
Yeah, exactly. but yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
the one, you're lucky that you have all of your stuff. We started so long ago that
yeah,
our original first show was on a 3/4 inch tape.
wow,
which ended up just rotting in our basement. So we don't even have, and then I had the most rickety old HTML website, because our website went online, I think the show started in 91. I think the website went online in 94, if I'm not mistaken. And for the longest time, it didn't really get that upgraded, and it was terrible. So finally it was like, okay, I've got to, get a WordPress, update this website. And when it was done, of course, I didn't do it myself, but the people who transferred the reviews, they lost a whole lot of stuff. The formatting was lost on a lot of them, and a lot of them, if you look at an old review, you might see my review is for the movie, but Robin's is for an entirely different movie. And for years now, I've been going through trying to clean that up, trying to re-add in the old stuff without breaking the old links that are still there in like Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb and other things. So yeah, you're lucky you have your old content all preserved, because I lost a lot of mine. I still have all the written stuff myself. It's just getting the time to upload it and clean it up while still going forward with new stuff is hard.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hard part too, is that I don't get to watch, unless I'm doing it for a particular podcast, I don't get to watch my favorites, the classics, very much because I'm so busy covering the new stuff, particularly during the holidays, because I can't watch my Christmas favorites because I'm busy watching 130 Christmas movies, that come out. And also during the holidays is when all the Oscar screeners come. So it's like, I have a really weird dynamic because I'm watching all these, made for TV Christmas movies and then watching Oscar movies. It's like this weird kind of combination of the two.
Yeah.
But yeah,
The end of the year is always rough.
it's hard. Yeah. Well, before we go, you said that we ask for something that you're proud of. I mean, it sounds like your legacy and just your incredible body of work, that alone is something to be proud of.
Yeah, as I said, I would just go to my top 10 lists because it's always the writing that I've done there is going to be the most passionate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously.
And your favorite last year was Tar, right?
Yes, it was. Did you see it?
I did, and I recommended it. I kind of wish that we'd gotten a little bit more of a connection between her and the music. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of that, but I think it was a very well made film. So yeah, I liked it.
I thought it was brilliant. She wasn't originally going to be a conductor when Todd Field first wrote it. I'm trying to remember what he originally had her as something completely different for a career. And then the conducting thing came in and it just all clicked for him.
Yeah. Well, and then your second favorite, Banshees of Inisherin, that was one that I didn't respond to. It was not for me, but I recognized the craft involved. I couldn't with the fingers. It was just too much. I did not believe that character would do that. I didn't believe that it would do it multiple times. I don't know. It was just too much for me, but it was well made.
Yeah, and I was very disappointed that Colin Farrell in particular did not win the Oscar for that. Did you see their earlier film together, In Bruges?
Yeah, I like that much better.
That I would say I would give that one the slight edge over Banshees. But yeah, no, I adored Banshees of Inisherin. I think it was
the year for the donkey movie.
I understand where you're coming from. I saw it a bit more allegorically, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it was the year for the donkey movie last year.
Yeah, they were everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, it's funny. I just before we got on this call, I saw a headline that you can now go to the Banshees of Inisherin pub and they have a donkey there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah.
My husband loves donkeys, so maybe we'll actually make that trip.
Yeah, there you go. Why not? Go to Ireland. Well, thank you so much for coming on, talking to me. This was a real treat. And if people want to watch your show, if people want to read your reviews, where should they go?
They should go to reelingreviews.com.
Very good. And I'll have the link in there. And congratulations. That's just an amazing accomplishment to have a show that long in this day and age.
Yeah. Yeah, we're getting old. It was very nice meeting you. I enjoyed the conversation. We'll have to continue the conversation privately.
Yeah. And if you're all listening, let us know what you think of all the things we talked about. We'd love to hear. And thanks again. And we'll have to touch base maybe at the end of the year, see how the year ended up turning out. I think that would be fun. So, yeah. All right. I'd like to thank Laura for coming on the podcast. That was so much fun. I can't even believe she's had a show on since 1991. That is unbelievable. So definitely check out her site and her reviews. I think she's super cool. So that was great. And so let me know what you think about all the things we talked about. I would really appreciate it. Please, if you're listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. And if you are watching YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. I would appreciate that so much. Also have the Patreon group and merch store, so check that out. And thanks again to Laura. That was really fun. And we'll talk to y'all later. Bye.